The applause is loud, but it's brief. It's a wave that hits you in the chest and then pulls back into the ocean like it was never there. What stays is the silence afterward. That's the part nobody rehearses for. When the lights cool and the room empties, you're left standing with whatever the noise was covering up. Because the truth is, clapping hands can drown out a lot of questions, but only for a moment. People think success is loud. It isn't. Success is quiet. It whispers to you on the drive home. It sits next to you at the kitchen table when the house finally settles. And that's when it starts asking for things: time, attention, pieces of you that don't grow back the same way. The bill doesn't arrive on the stage, it arrives at home. You feel safest right before it starts to cost you. That moment when everything's working but nothing has been taken yet. When doors open and nobody's asking what you're willing to close behind you. That's the most dangerous comfort there is because it convinces you the price has already been paid. It hasn't. It's just been deferred. See, success doesn't rush you. It lets you walk into it with confidence. It lets you believe you're in control. And slowly, quietly, it rearranges your life. Not in dramatic moves, in small trades. One missed dinner, one promise postponed. One night you tell yourself, just this once, and then another, and another, until the life you are working for becomes the life you're explaining away. Nobody warns you about the loneliness that can follow achievement. They show you the trophies, not the empty rooms. They show you the headlines, not the unanswered messages. Because when everyone is watching, you feel full. When no one is watching, you find out what you've been feeding on. Applause doesn't nourish you, it excites you. And excitement fades fast. There's a moment, usually late at night, when the phone stops buzzing and the mind starts talking. That's when the real accounting begins. You replay conversations, you remember faces you haven't seen in years. You ask yourself when ambition quietly replaced presence. And the answer is never one big decision. It's always 1,000 small ones you didn't think mattered. Success feels safest when it still feels like a reward, before it turns into responsibility, before it demands consistency instead of hunger, before it expects you to be the same person when no one's clapping. That's when people stumble, not because they failed, but because they succeeded without asking what it would require to keep their soul intact. And here's the part people don't like to hear. Some costs don't show up as pain. They show up as numbness. You don't feel broken. You feel efficient. You don't feel lost. You feel busy. And that's how years pass without being lived. That's how you wake up one day respected by strangers and unfamiliar to yourself. The noise fades. It always does. Crowds move on. Trends change. Names stop getting called. What remains is character. What remains is the life you built when no one was watching. That's the only success that survives the silence. So before you chase the next win, sit with the quiet. Ask it questions. Listen closely to what it answers, because the stage will cheer you for what you do. Home will judge you for who you became doing it. Time is patient. It doesn't argue with you. It doesn't interrupt while you explain yourself. It just watches, day after day, choice after choice, and it keeps perfect records. You may forget what you decided 10 years ago, but time doesn't. It remembers everything you fed it. People think their big moments define them. They don't. It's the small decisions that do the real work. The ones that feel too minor to matter. The extra hour you didn't spend. The conversation you avoided. The discipline you postponed because tomorrow felt guaranteed. Those moments age quietly. They harden. And one day they introduce themselves as your life. Time doesn't care what you meant, only what you did. Intentions are fragile things. They sound strong in the present, but they dissolve when they meet repetition. You can mean well once. You can mean well for a week. But time doesn't deal in promises. It deals in patterns. What you repeat becomes what you are. Not what you hoped. Not what you planned. What you practiced. There's a lie we tell ourselves when we're young enough to believe we can outpace consequences. We say, I'll fix it later. Later is time's favorite word, because later usually never shows up the way you expect. Later comes with interest. Later arrives with stiffness in your knees, distance in your relationships, and habits that have learned how to survive without your permission. Time is the only judge that never needs evidence. It doesn't listen to excuses about circumstance or intentions. It doesn't care how busy you were or how unfair it felt. It just adds things up, quietly, relentlessly. And then one morning you wake up and realize you didn't arrive here suddenly. You walked here slowly, one decision at a time. That's the part that scares people because it means the mirror doesn't lie. Your calendar tells the truth. Your relationships tell the truth. Your body tells the truth. They all speak the same language: accumulated choice, not passion, not talent, not desire. Choice. You can't negotiate with time. You can only cooperate with it. Every day, you either invest or you withdraw. And like any account, neglect doesn't scream at you right away. It waits. It lets you feel comfortable while the balance slips. Until one day you check and realize the cost wasn't a moment, it was years. What you tolerate today becomes the standard tomorrow. What you delay today becomes the burden tomorrow. And what you repeat today becomes the story someone else tells about you tomorrow. Time never forgets what you chose, even when you do. The good news and the responsibility is this: time also remembers discipline. It remembers consistency. It remembers the quiet nights when you did the right thing and nobody noticed. Those decisions age too. They compound. They protect you later when motivation runs out and strength isn't what it used to be. Time isn't cruel. It's honest. It gives everyone the same deal. You choose, I keep score. So choose carefully, because one day, time will introduce you to the man your decisions created, and you won't be able to explain him away. Comfort is subtle. It doesn't storm your life. It settles into it. It pulls up a chair and speaks softly, tells you you've earned a break, that you've done enough for today, for this year, maybe for good. Comfort never kills you fast. That's why it wins. An easy life doesn't announce what it's taking. It doesn't steal with force. It trades. It offers relief in exchange for your edge. It offers convenience in exchange for your future. One soft choice at a time. One skipped effort. One moment where you choose what feels good over what builds strength. And because nothing hurts right away, you think nothing is wrong. Comfort trains you to avoid necessary pain. The kind of pain that sharpens you. The pain that teaches you where your limits really are. The pain that tells you you're still alive and capable of more. But once comfort takes over, pain starts to look like a threat instead of a teacher. You avoid it. You resent it. You design your life around never having to face it again. And that's when growth stops. Not dramatically, quietly. Muscles weaken. Discipline softens. Standards lower. You don't fall behind, you drift. And drifting feels peaceful until you realize you're nowhere near where you meant to be. Comfort doesn't ruin you in a year. It ruins you over decades, while convincing you everything is fine. Shortcuts work the same way. They feel smart, efficient, necessary. You tell yourself you're just saving time, just bending the rules a little, just getting around something outdated. But every shortcut writes a future paragraph. And you don't get to edit it later. You don't escape the work. You reschedule it. What you skip today waits for you tomorrow, stronger and less forgiving. The corner you cut once becomes the corner you cut twice. Then it becomes the way you do things. And one day, without noticing the exact moment it happened, shortcuts stop being decisions and start being character. People think integrity is built in big moments. It isn't. It's built when no one would blame you for taking the easy way out, and you don't. Or when no one would notice if you did, and you still don't. Repeated shortcuts don't just save time. They teach you who you're willing to become to get what you want. Eventually, life asks you to stand on the foundation you rushed through building. And when it cracks, you remember every step you skipped. Every excuse you made sound reasonable. Every time you told yourself you'd make it right later. Later is where the weight shows up. Regret knows all of this, and regret is patient. Regret doesn't chase you. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand attention. It walks behind you quietly, letting you live, letting you succeed, letting you stay busy. It understands timing better than you do. Regret never knocks loudly. It wants you to open the door. The moment usually comes when the noise dies down, when the body slows, when the future gets shorter and the past gets heavier. That's when you realize regret has been there the whole time, watching every compromise, every delay, every moment you chose comfort over courage. Regret doesn't hurt because of what you did. It hurts because of what you didn't do when you still could. The call you never made. The standard you never held. The hard path you avoided because the easy one was right there. Regret doesn't scream. It whispers, "You knew better." And the hardest part? Regret doesn't ask for much. Just a few minutes of honesty. Just enough quiet for you to see the distance between the life you lived and the life you were capable of. That's why people stay busy. That's why they keep the noise on. Silence is where regret speaks clearly. But here's the truth that still matters. As long as you're breathing, regret hasn't finished its work. It waits, but it also watches. And the moment you choose discipline over comfort, effort over shortcuts, courage over ease, regret loses ground. It doesn't disappear, but it steps back. And sometimes that's enough to change the rest of the story. People don't change. They respond to patterns, and whether you like it or not, you taught them those patterns. Every time you stayed silent when something crossed the line, every time you said yes when your gut was screaming no, every time you laughed something off that should have been addressed, you were teaching a lesson. Not with words, with permission. The world is always taking notes, and it learns fastest from what you tolerate. Boundaries aren't built in speeches, they're built in moments of discomfort. Small, awkward moments where you risk being misunderstood in order to be respected. Most people avoid those moments. They choose peace over clarity. And slowly, respect erodes. Not in a dramatic confrontation, but in quiet adjustments. It starts subtly. A tone shift, a delayed response, a decision made without consulting you. Nothing big enough to protest, nothing obvious enough to point at, but you feel it. That slow slide from consideration to convenience. And by the time it's undeniable, it feels personal, when in truth, it's procedural. You train the world how to treat you, not because people are cruel, but because people are efficient. They do what works. If crossing your boundary costs them nothing, they'll cross it again. If dismissing your needs carries no consequence, they'll stop factoring them in. Not out of malice, out of habit. Respect doesn't vanish overnight. It thins out. It fades the way ink fades on old paper. And the reason it's so hard to recover is because reversing a pattern takes more energy than creating one. The moment you decide to stand firm, people are surprised. Not because you're wrong, but because you've changed the rules mid-game. That's where most people fold. They mistake resistance for rejection. They think being questioned means being unreasonable. So they retreat. They explain. They soften. And in doing so, they teach the lesson all over again. Push here, and it will give. Here's the truth most people don't want to accept. If you want to be treated differently, you have to behave differently. Not louder, not angrier, clearer, consistent, calm enough to walk away when necessary, strong enough to let discomfort sit in the room without rushing to fix it. Boundaries cost you something. They might cost you approval, familiarity, even certain relationships. But what they give you back is self-respect. And that's the foundation every other form of respect is built on. Without it, you're negotiating from a weak position no matter how kind or capable you are. The world isn't confused about you. It's responding to the version of you you've been practicing for years. And the good news is, patterns can be retrained, but not with one conversation, with repetition, with actions that line up even when it's inconvenient. Because once people see that your no means no, that your standards don't move with pressure, something shifts. They don't suddenly become better people. They become more accurate, and accuracy, that quiet, earned respect, is the kind that lasts when the noise is gone. Later is the most convincing lie we tell ourselves. It sounds harmless, responsible even. It lets you off the hook without sounding like you quit. I'll fix it later feels like progress, but it isn't. It's a pause button that never unfreezes. a way to avoid today while pretending you still respect tomorrow. Postponement doesn't stay an action. It becomes an identity. You don't just delay the work, you become the kind of person who delays, the kind who means well, the kind who's always about to start. And over time, that self image hardens, not because you chose it outright, but because you practiced it daily. Later feels endless when you're young enough to believe time is generous. When weeks blur together and years feel abstract, you assume there will be a clean moment ahead, a quieter season, more energy, fewer obstacles. But later never arrives empty handed. It comes crowded, with responsibilities, with fatigue, with consequences you didn't plan for. And then one day, later shows up with a limit. That's the moment that catches people off guard. Not the passing of time, but the sudden awareness of it. The realization that options have narrowed, that recovery costs more than prevention ever would have, that fixing something now would have been difficult, but fixing it later might be impossible. I'll fix it later is seductive because it protects your comfort today. It spares you the discomfort of action, the awkward conversation, the disciplined routine, the honest look in the mirror. And each time you choose comfort, later grows heavier. Not louder, heavier. You don't feel the weight at first. That's the trick. You feel functional. You feel busy. You feel like you're still in the game. But underneath, momentum is decaying. Skills dull. Relationships thin. Health slips. And because it happens gradually, you mistake survival for stability. Later doesn't ask for much. Just one more delay. One more excuse that sounds reasonable. One more promise you don't have to keep yet. And before you know it, later has taken your confidence, not by force, but by repetition. The most painful part isn't the unfinished work. It's the quiet doubt that creeps in. The voice that asks whether you're still someone who follows through, whether you can trust yourself when things get hard. That doubt doesn't come from failure. It comes from delay. Here's the truth that cuts through the lie. Later is never free. You either pay with effort now, or you pay with regret later. And regret charges interest. It shows up when energy is lower, when time is shorter, when courage is harder to summon. Action doesn't require confidence. Confidence comes from action. And the smallest honest step taken now does more to reclaim your future than the most perfect plan postponed. Later feels endless, right up until the moment it isn't. And when that moment comes, all you're left with is what you chose to do when you still had the chance. Unlived lives don't die. They follow you. Potential doesn't vanish when you ignore it. It doesn't get offended and leave. It waits. Patiently. Silently. It sits in the background of your days, watching you choose comfort, routine, and familiarity over the harder path you once imagined for yourself. The weight of what you never finished is quiet, but it's constant. It's not the loud pain of failure. It's the dull pressure of incompletion. The book half written, the discipline half built, the version of yourself you visited briefly and then abandoned. Those things don't haunt you all at once. They hum, low and steady. And over time, that hum turns into tension. Unrealized potential doesn't usually become sadness. Sadness has an outlet. You cry, you grieve, you heal. Bitterness is different. Bitterness settles in. It hardens. It looks for somewhere to go, and when it can't face inward, it turns outward, toward people who remind you of what you didn't finish, toward change, toward effort itself. You start calling ambition unrealistic, discipline obsessive, growth unnecessary, not because you believe it, but because believing it protects you from the mirror. It's easier to dismiss the climb than to admit you stopped climbing. Potential waits because it belongs to you. It doesn't age the way the body does, but it does grow heavier. Carrying unused ability through life is exhausting. You don't notice the strain at first because you get used to the weight, but it shows up in irritability, in restlessness, in the quiet sense that something is off, even when everything looks fine. The most dangerous part is that you can still succeed while carrying unrealized potential. You can be admired, respected, comfortable, and still feel the friction between who you are and who you were capable of becoming. That friction doesn't break you, it wears you down. Potential doesn't ask for perfection, it asks for engagement, movement, effort. It doesn't demand that you win, it demands that you try honestly. And when you don't, it doesn't punish you immediately. It waits for time to do that work. Years later, potential shows up as impatience with others, as cynicism, as the need to be right instead of the desire to grow. You don't miss the dream, you resent the reminder of it. But here's the truth most people never hear: potential also waits for redemption. It doesn't expire the moment you fall behind. It doesn't close the door because you took too long. As long as you're breathing, it's still there, watching to see if you'll turn around and pick it up again. The weight doesn't disappear when you ignore it. It disappears when you carry it forward, when you finish something small, when you honor a commitment, when you choose progress over explanation. Unlived lives follow you, but they don't have to haunt you. They can still become you if you're willing to stop running and start answering the quiet pull you felt all along. You won't control the story, only the evidence. Reputation is what people say about you while you're still speaking. Legacy is what remains when your voice is gone. Reputation lives in words. Legacy lives in behavior that outlasts explanation. One is managed, the other is earned. When you're no longer in the room, people don't quote your intentions. They remember how it felt to deal with you. Whether you were consistent, whether you showed up when it mattered, whether your presence made things heavier or lighter. That's the evidence that survives you. Legacy isn't built in public moments, it's built in repetition, in how you treated people who couldn't do anything for you, in the standards you kept when nobody was keeping score, in the way your decisions made other people's lives easier or harder long after you moved on. You can polish your image all you want. Time will sand it down. What's left is what you practiced, the patience you showed, the courage you avoided, the responsibility you carried without applause. That's what people inherit from you. And then one day, the conversations stop. Not with others, with yourself. There comes a moment when explanations no longer work, when you can't blame circumstances, timing, or other people, when the noise fades for good and you're left alone with the truth, unchallenged. That's the last conversation with yourself. The questions aren't dramatic, they're simple, and that's what makes them impossible to escape. Did I live according to what I knew was right? Did I choose comfort when courage was required? Did I become who I respected, or just who I could justify? At that point, justification has no value. You don't need to convince anyone anymore. There's no audience, no argument to win. Just a quiet reckoning between the life you lived and the standards you claimed. Peace doesn't come from having good excuses. It comes from having fewer apologies to make, from knowing that when it was hard, you didn't disappear, that when it mattered, you didn't delay, that when the cost showed up, you paid it willingly. In the end, you don't argue with the truth. You sit with it, and the weight of that moment is shaped long before it arrives. It's shaped by ordinary days, small decisions, unseen discipline, the choice to do the right thing when it would have been easier not to. That final conversation isn't about success or failure. It's about alignment, whether your life matched your values when no one was watching, and if it did, the silence won't be empty. It will be calm. That's what survives you.